meeting of the Finance meeting of the County Commissioners, our regular weekly schedule here today, Wednesday, June 24. And at this point, I'll call the meeting to order, and we generally dispense with roll call for this meeting, is that correct? Okay, so we have the minutes of the June 17 meeting to address, so I'll entertain a motion regarding to the meeting minutes of June 17.
I'll move to approve the meeting minutes, but I did note that Kathy Yorkovitz, her name is spelled incorrectly. So we'll have to fix the spelling of her last name on the minutes. But I do move to approve after we, conditioned on changing that spelling.
Second.
Okay, so moved and seconded. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Okay, our topic for today, and there is action anticipated with this, is we have representatives from the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation to discuss, I guess the Payroll Protection Program grant issue in regards to CAEDC. So, and then there's a recommended resolution 2020-19 in regards to same. So at this point, Jamie or Shireen, one of you ready to speak to this?
Shireen, would you go ahead and speak to it in detail? But Cumberland Area Economic Development has, the board has asked the commissioners to consider supporting the application of a PPP request for funding for Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation. Shireen has the details on that amount, but we too, like many others, have been significantly impacted over the past 3 months, specifically taking a hit from the loss of hotel tax revenue that is Shireen, I'll let you take it from there.
Okay. Good afternoon, Commissioners. We initially chose not to apply for the PPP when it was first announced because we did not want to compete with our many needy businesses in the community, which we are here to support. But we've been going through the difficulties for the past 3 months. We're now starting to see our hotel tax diminish. And we have a plan to tap into reserves until they are exhausted. We are worried about the COVID coming back potentially in the fall, and our scenario planning really doesn't account for that. So we are requesting that the Board of Commissioners authorize CAEDC to pursue this PPP application. It is a loan forgiveness program. It's titled a loan program. However, we feel fairly confident that it will be forgiven. And with the new rules that have come out, we have up to 24 weeks to utilize it. The initial PPP program had an 8-week rush. So we can apply for it if we are funded. We can choose to draw on it or not draw on it depending on the circumstances and our economy's recovery over the summer and fall months. It is based on 2.5 times our average monthly payroll, and it also includes group health insurance costs, retirement benefit costs, and state unemployment costs. So it's a pure calculation that we would be working through our SBA lending institution, Midcon Bank, to secure these funds. Are there any questions that I can answer?
Yeah, so and during that period, there was no reduction in force at CAEDC, is that correct?
Correct.
All right.
Everyone has been fully occupied responding to the pandemic and helping our businesses. As part of this program, the program was designed to prevent layoffs or furloughs and or to allow businesses to bring their employees back. And at the moment, we're at our full complement of 13 full-time people with one vacancy that's being held vacant.
And Shereen, the total amount shall not exceed 187,490. Is that, I just want to make sure that I'm very clear about that.
It was changed. The bank had a new calculation worksheet, and so now it's been upped to 213,475 would be the application amount. They had a different way to calculate what we would be eligible for.
Shereen, do you anticipate spending all of that?
At this juncture, immediately, no. I really think it's, from my perspective, it's the wait and see what happens in the fall. And also we're looking to see, how quickly our hotel occupancy can start to rebound. We have projected 0 occupancy for the months of April, May, June, and July. And I expect we'll have some minimal occupancy, but it will not be anywhere near what we normally get. To give you some context, this request for 213,475, our average hotel tax yield for 1 month over the course of 12 months is $190,000. So this is approximately a little over 1 month's worth of hotel tax. So it gives us 1 month of cushion, if you will, should we need it. And obviously the calculation is based on 2.5 times the wage.
Shereen, can you think of a reason why the forgiveness aspect would not kick in?
No. Based on all of my reading and the information that is available, which clearly changes in our COVID world, one of the unique things about our application is we are only including payroll. The other eligible expenses that could be included are interest payments on mortgage obligations, rent, utilities, and interest on any other debt. And as CAEDC, as your designated 501c3, we do not have any of those other administrative costs to include. So the way the program's designed is up to 75% would be forgiven if you had those other costs, but we don't. We just don't have it. We are only requesting for payroll, so I would expect that it would be 100% forgiven.
And then, Shereen, at the time of forgiveness, is it 100% forgiven up front, or is the forgiveness on a schedule?
Honestly, I don't know.
Okay.
The worksheets that we have for the bank, they require you to do the calculation, and if and when we are authorized to sign it, it shows that 100% will be forgiven.
Okay, and I'm asking because I see we will be paying 1% interest on this loan?
After so many years, if it's not forgiven, and you have to pay it back, it's a 1%.
Okay.
It was 2 years after award date, and I think it's now 5 years. The rule just changed.
And I would add that the forgiveness guidelines are changing pretty much weekly. So I don't know that we can even rest on what's currently out there, but I just saw a notice this week of some changes.
Okay, thank you, Jamie.
I do know of 2 small business owners who have applied for this for payroll only, and they received their funding very quickly. And hopefully we have that same luck. The application and the resolution we have in front of us will have to change, I assume, since we have different amounts.
Yep.
So Keith, I guess we could still make a motion to approve it based on that.
Right, you can make a motion to approve that resolution if it's acceptable with the number put in the final version.
Okay.
Okay, do we have any information at all on how widely accepted payroll protection was by businesses in the county?
Commissioner, I don't know if we have anything specifically, but I am about to send out another survey. We have done a survey early, about mid-March, and we're going to send out another survey to poll those businesses. We had 171 responses, and I think about 40% of those respondents had pursued PPP. Whether they got it or not, we're not sure. But we are going to send out another survey here this afternoon that will hopefully give us some feedback relative to that. I know there is an issue that's still being considered as a result of the potential county relief block grant funds and the conflict with whether you receive PPP or EIDL, and hopefully that will be resolved soon. But yeah, I would anticipate that a pretty good portion did receive PPP. Now, I think that a lot of them, depending on how quickly they were able to come back, or once they realized that they only had 8 weeks until they changed the guidelines, I think a lot of people may have paid that PPP back.
So, a number of questions on that. So if they paid it back, does that in any way, are we aware that that in any way changes their eligibility regarding the block grant money? Because I think what you're referring to is, of course, the restriction that if they took PPP, they cannot accept block grant money.
Yeah, that's still one of those questionable items that I think your new coordinator is trying to get information on as well.
Yeah, he asked us
It's
about
clear. It's
Yes,
clear in those guidelines.
talking to CAEDC on it, and we're trying to chisel together a strategy to see. The only guidance we have is from the County Commissioners Association of Pennsylvania, and they, I heard directly from the executive director, and she said, this is what it states, and it was pretty black and white that they are not eligible. There was no indication, no hedging, no indication that there was a possibility that being revisited in any way. I'm not aware if there's a plan to revisit that in any way. So that obviously will have a huge impact on our applicant base.
Yeah, and after looking at the enabling legislation, it says it should give preference to businesses that did not receive PPP, but it does not say that they are ineligible. So I think there's going to be, between what was put out through DCED and enabling legislation, there's a conflict that we're hoping that can be resolved before we would put out our small business block grant.
All right.
This may not be related, Commissioner Eichelberger, but to answer your original question, for the first round of businesses that got PPP, when the 8 weeks came up, that was the period that they had to then go back to their bank, their lender, and determine the forgiveness ratio. And what was built into that program at that time was a 6 to 12 month deferment period to kind of assess the business's needs. Where were they? Draw all the money down, and payments to start to repay if not forgiven would not have started just yet.
Okay. In regards to the hotel occupancy, of course, we had the resolution this week, difficult as it was, in regards to Carlisle events, which generally is one of the major drivers of occupancy in the area. So they're back in business, and they have they now concluding a show, I believe. That was, I believe, one of their larger shows. Do we have any type of even anecdotal feedback in regards to what the resumption of business at the lodging establishments was like?
Yeah, our sense is this past weekend, we heard from several hotels. They had pretty near full occupancy as a direct result of the car shows. We have another one this weekend. I would hope the same will occur. So that's a really positive sign for our recovery pace. What we don't know is, these shows were delayed. Obviously, the occupancy levels aren't what we would have been accustomed to. This past weekend's Spring Carlisle, we would have normally seen those hotel results in April, not mid-June. So we're kind of playing a catch-up game. At some point when we get to the fall show, that date isn't going to change. Hopefully we'll catch up to be a little more practical, that we can do some comparisons to prior years.
So were there shows that were actually canceled, or was everything just delayed?
One show was canceled, and then several were pushed forward. In the case of Spring Carlisle, it was pushed forward twice.
Okay.
So that creates
So some of the revenue, the hotel
a
tax
natural
revenue,
cancellation.
some of the hotel tax revenue is merely deferred, but there is a portion of it that is lost.
Yes,
All right.
it will not mirror what we normally would have gotten.
Right, just because attendance is down.
My guess.
Yeah, I think attendance, certainly attendance from, what people have said, attendance was down. And we don't know, we've had discussions with Carlisle Events, and, they have, because they changed some of the dates, there's conflicts with some other events around the country. So, they anticipate that, they aren't going to be at full capacity, even with some of their future shows.
Okay, what I was getting at is, so the assumption of back by 0 and 0 for hotel tax revenues is probably extremely conservative, and a worst case scenario is not likely to materialize. Of course, we don't know if there's a resurgence, if we might get hit on the back end of that too. So there's a lot of what involved here, and understandably so. Okay. I need a little clarification on some other items. So who is the applicant for this? Is it the county? Is it CAEDC? Who is the applicant?
CAEDC is the applicant. The county as the owner of CAEDC. There's a part on the form where we have to indicate who the owner of the organization is, and
Right.
because you are the members, you are listed on the application.
Okay, I'm having a little trouble understanding why there's an expectation that I have to provide my personal social security number as the applicant then. And I'll tell you why. It concerns me. Obviously, there's the identity theft concerns. I mean, putting it on a state document, I have no idea who sees that, where that goes. But also, there's a lot of vagueness around the whole repayment and what financial liabilities are involved, and what happens if somebody accepts the money and then it's found out through audit that they weren't allowed to have the money. And I'm signing this document. Something does not ring correct to me, and obviously I'm concerned about whether there's a financial liability.
Gary, you would not be signing the document. What we're asking, the reason for the county's resolution is to authorize CAEDC to pursue this application, which technically is a loan.
Yes.
That we expect will be forgiven. CAEDC is not authorized to incur debt, incur liability. So
Okay.
this action is brought to you to authorize CAEDC to pursue
Be
this.
the applicant. So then it'll be somebody else is the applicant. I'm no longer the
Jamie.
applicant. So are they going to?
And you,
Are they going to accept they would not accept the federal tax number, tax identification number that the county provided. Maybe we're not creditworthy, we're only for oil.
let me say, Gary, I share and I understand your concern. I have the same concern when I have to provide my personal social security number and my birth date to banks, to institutions that CAEDC does business with, just because I'm a signer on the account. It's my personal information that's going on a corporate entity's
Right.
documents, because they need to know who I am.
Yeah. Well, this is not the first time we've been asked to do that as commissioners, but I've never been asked to do it with a program that is is so nebulous and in which the whole idea of repayment is so muddy. Not to mention that I'm not sure I understand the audit requirements. The county is the grantee here, so we have financial responsibility for,
this,
what's that?
CAEDC, for this PPP.
Okay, all right, so it's just a block grant.
Okay.
Okay, one of our ongoing concerns has been obviously that a lot of this was passed without sufficient thought, and we understand why. Sufficient thought to what happens on the back end, how are the details, met, how is the audit requirements met, et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if that situation exists with PPP or not, but, so just to expedite this, so if we pass the resolution, that allows you folks to be the applicant. Does that erase the entire question of my having to sign then?
You don't have to sign at all, but we need somebody's social security number, and it can't be mine or Jamie's. It needs to be a county
So they
person.
still need a social security number.
Government.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but I don't understand why the county or someone with the county needs to provide a social security number. If CAEDC is the grantee, CAEDC is the applicant, these three commissioners are enacting, hopefully today, a resolution in their capacity as members of CAEDC. The county doesn't own CAEDC. The county is not financially responsible for CAEDC. They fund CAEDC because of hotel revenues, as you're aware. So I'm just concerned again why a county representative needs to provide a social security number.
Because the members of the CAEDC organization is county government.
Well, it's county.
Three commissioners are the members of this entity, that's why.
I fully understand that, but CAEDC is operated by a board of directors.
Yes.
I have to.
Operated by, not owned by.
It almost sounds to me like the structure of the loan is wrong.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't, I looked at the loan application and I looked at the need for the resolution. And I agree with that. I mean, it just seems, it's confusing to begin with, and I think incorrect to the extent that it includes the commissioners or any one of them having to provide a social security number. If you do it for CAEDC in terms of other loans and obligations with banks, and you may not be able to do it this time, I don't know why a board representative of CAEDC cannot do that. Maybe Mid-Penn Bank has a really good answer, but I don't know what that is.
Let me just add.
The only good answer they've given me is that you're not really taking on any liability and there's no recourse,
How about we proceed as though I would be signing as the CEO for the organization?
That's how it's set up, Jamie.
Yeah, that's the resolution I
I
have there
can
as
also
well.
put my social security in as the representative of the organization?
To you guys.
I would think that would be a good thing to do.
I mean, the question is that acceptable to Mid-Penn? And
Right.
And bouncing off of what Keith has said here, I do not understand why suddenly this indebtedness question if you've applied for other lending capacity with financial institutions, how is this one different than what you've already done before? Because we weren't asked to sign those documents.
We've never borrowed from financial institutions as CAEDC. It's just merely, my example was about opening up a bank account.
Inventory,
Yeah.
and account, and that's why she had to provide the information.
Yeah, on the application, it states that CAEDC is the applicant, but there's a
I'm
section.
willing to try with the bank, what Jamie had suggested, I'm willing to give it a go.
As I was trying to say, there's also a piece on the application that says applicant ownership. It says list all owners of 20% or more of the equity of the applicant, which is CAEDC. And in that section, that lists Cumberland County as 100% ownership.
Yeah, and that's not correct.
Okay.
That is a standard corporate form requirement, and it does not apply in this case with the county.
Okay, so then that would need to change as well.
Right, that's what I'm
Okay.
saying.
So we need some serious interaction with Mid-Penn Bank so that they understand
Right.
our concerns on this, which we believe are.
Nobody has an ownership interest in CAEDC. It's just that simple. It's not represented by stock or any equity.
Yeah, I guess part of the question here may arise from the euphemistic term owners. We're not truly owners in an equity sense, but we are essentially
The members, that's it.
the members,
That's it.
corporate members.
Okay.
All right, so that's,
Just to
we
move it
will
forward.
inquire with Mid-Penn and see if they can resolve all of that. I think our other question here really resolves around, we have two questions. There is obviously the question of, are we supportive of the idea of CAEDC applying for the PPP? And then there is, of course, the question of us passing the resolution we still need the resolution, is that correct?
Yes, if they want.
All right, so those are the questions before us. So I'll open it at this point. Stand by, folks. Let's see if there's any comment from my colleagues in regards to CAEDC's participation in the program. If anyone have any questions or issues?
I do. I have very serious, I mean, I have concerns about the borrowing of this money when what's presented to us, in front of us today is not accurate. So we have a resolution that's not accurate, and we have a loan application that's not accurate. And I'm becoming increasingly uncomfortable in agreeing to a resolution for something that is so inaccurate. I mean, it's one thing for me to say, I agree to this if we change the spelling. I'm having a hard time saying I would approve this resolution with what I see as some errors in it at this point in time, and the loan application also. And I know there's some speed necessary on this, because does this have to be turned in?
Well, the end of the month is the deadline, but Mid-Penn is saying they need some time to.
Yeah, Gene, this was only presented to our finance committee on June 12th, approved by the CAEDC board of directors on June 16th. I've been working with the bank and our accountant to pull this together. We're working around others' vacation schedules. The deadline is June 30th. I realize this is fast tracking. And as soon as we put something in early to the bank to start to get it working, that's when it surfaced that, oh, you're eligible for more. We need somebody else's social security number. So, these inaccuracy, I apologize. They're not intentional, and they're not just due to speed. It's unfortunately inherent of how this process is working.
I guess the other option is we would consider you approving it as is and foregoing that difference of about $30,000, if that is an issue. Approving it's subject to a change or an edit in the number.
Except that, I don't disagree with you, except that there is a fundamental problem with the loan application and the applicant ownership. And I wonder what happens when Mid-Penn Bank finds out that CAEDC doesn't really have an owner. I'm not trying to be a fly in the ointment here. I mean, as a member of this entity, as a member of CAEDC, this is a serious responsibility. I'm not going to take this kind of responsibility lightly. I think we have to go back and really look at this. You can't turn this in with Cumberland County as the owner of this entity of CAEDC. You can't.
Keith, from what I see, the only error in the resolution is the dollar amount. The resolution is not tied into the application. The application needs to change, but the resolution is fine, correct me if I'm wrong, with the exception of the amount, it should be $213,475.
That's correct. That number was provided yesterday to me.
Yeah, I have no issues with the resolution. I have no issues supporting CAEDC's request to do this. So I am supportive of it.
Does the resolution provide Jamie with signature authority?
Yes, on the application.
Need to be in the
and
resolution.
documents required by Mid-Penn Bank.
approve the resolution, which simply authorizes them to proceed with the application process.
Right.
We still have details to work out in terms of meeting the letter of the law in the application process. Would there be any reason for us
Correct.
not to approve the resolution, knowing that there's still some time to remedy the application?
I can't speak to the timing issue of Mid-Penn Bank, but, I mean, conceivably, if the form of the resolution is a cookie cutter for a regular corporation,
Yeah.
I don't know what kind of problem that's gonna cause them if we say we're not the owner and we don't wanna sign. But that's really a separate issue from approving the resolution
Okay.
itself.
So there'd be no problem approving the resolution, and then we can work the rest out,
Correct.
presumably before the deadline's passed. For
Because
instance.
your resolution authorizes the CEO of the entity to sign the application and any other documents required for this loan. It doesn't require you to sign anything required by this loan.
Okay.
Keith, could and should the motion include something to the effect of the application needs to be corrected?
Yes, simply to the point of removing the commissioners as the owners.
Okay. All right, and there's not the amount or anything, it's just that. for the-
No, they'll have to, Katie will have to, obviously have an application with the correct amount on it. And that resolution will authorize that amount to be borrowed. If you adopt that resolution with a change to number on it.
Okay.
I think I can frame this motion.
Okay, yeah, well,
Okay. So, you're okay with that, Commissioner DeLuca?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay.
Yeah, we'll keep
So,
going. I'll
I'm
pick
going-
up if you miss anything.
Okay, thank you, sir. I'm going to move to approve Resolution 2020-19, which is a resolution of the Board of Commissioners of Cumberland County in the Commissioner's capacity as members of the Cumberland Area Economic Development Corporation, authorizing CAEDC to apply for a Paycheck Protection Program loan from Mid-Penn Bank, with the caveat that the amount of the loan in the resolution needs to read $213,475, with an additional caveat in the motion to say that the loan application for the Paycheck Protection Program needs to be amended before it is submitted to Mid-Penn Bank and to the SBA, removing Cumberland County as the owner of CAEDC.
Okay, that is a motion.
Got it.
It's a motion and a half.
Is that fine without mentioning the commissioners, Cumberland County sufficient?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
In that case, I will second the motion.
Okay, so we have a motion on the table, it's been moved and seconded, open for further discussion, comments, questions. Good, Keith, anything we want to note to resolve? Okay. All right, on that, I'll call for the question. All in favor of the motion indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries. Very good. Okay, so you folks know what you need to do next, right? You got what you need.
Yes, thanks very much.
Okay.
Appreciate your consideration.
Yep, okay.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jane.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Shereen.
All right, very good. Okay, that was the two major topics. So at this point, we move to, we have other business, and then, of course, public comment before we adjourn the meeting. So, at this point, other business from the commissioners or from staff?
I don't have any.
I have nothing.
No, okay. We do have a request for public comment. One individual listed, and now would be the time, and he is absent. So, okay, well, it's noted he's not here. So at this point, we can open up for public comment for others. As a reminder, our practice on this is that, we allow 3 minutes for comment, and then if others wish to comment on a similar issue, we ask there not be mere repetition, that they bring something additional to the question at hand. So, and as when you speak, please, we ask you don't have to stand, but please identify yourself and where you're from. That'd be fine, you would, or if you see this, others.
my glasses are kind of hard to see them in. Good afternoon. I'm Kathy Yorkovitz from Camp Hill. And I'm back here today with other members of Capital Region Stand Up, hoping to continue the conversation we started last week. As you know, we called for proactive policy changes to lessen the likelihood that Black and brown residents of our county will experience discrimination and violence at the hands of our law enforcement personnel. Since our meeting last week, we've done some more research and we've come to share our findings and review our requests that we work on some changes together. I would like to return to the proposal for civilian review board. Last week, Commissioner Eichelberger stated that a civilian review board couldn't legally review individual misconduct or the disposition of citizen complaints, or maybe it's individual misconduct as a matter of federal law. And Commissioner Bosch, you raised some concerns about whether or not that would be a problem in terms of liability insurance for officers. So, and I just wanted to let you know that there's at least 150 municipalities across the country that have some type of citizen review board member. They're all very different. Many of them have powers, they're not all the same. Pittsburgh and Philadelphia are two of those municipalities that have created some type of review board. They all have the same goal, and that is to increase transparency and public confidence in the complaint process so that typically the boards review completed complaint investigations. So they're not doing, although some do hands-on investigation, but most don't have that power. They review the findings in the process. So we really think that's an important thing to try to improve the trust and what citizens feel more confident in the actions taken. We've had a couple of conversations with Sheriff Anderson. He seems to be amenable to this. And we would love to work together with you to see if we can come up with a way to create a commission. We think it's, one of the things that in doing research we found is that usually you don't want the commission to be right within the law enforcement body. You don't want it to report to the sheriff. You need an outside body, which should be the commissioners. That's why we feel like we need to be involved. So we want to ask you to work with us on this. Maybe we can see if we can come up with a model that you're comfortable with, that we're comfortable with, and they have them and share it, of course. So we of course would like to invite lawyers to help if we can see. They certainly are needed. So that's my 2 minutes.
Kathy, I'm going to ask you a question.
Sure.
Because you said you have 115 municipalities.
Mm-hmm.
And as I have expressed to this group repeatedly, that I am willing to work with you on these things, I would love to know the 115 municipalities and whatever information you have on it. Because if we can, if I can start working on this and bringing these things to the table, it's good for me to not have to reinvent the wheel, right? Okay? And I also appreciate those things in written format, in an email. There was another group that came here and asked us for something, and they brought a packet like this. And they brought research, and they gave one heck of a beautiful presentation that it was very hard to not pay attention to, okay? They had the research, they could go to the case law. This was the link to the case law. So I appreciate that kind of due diligence for me to be able to get into it, because me spending time going and finding out about it just delays the process.
We'd be happy to provide.
Thank you.
Just to follow up on that, that would be important from my standpoint when I look at it and give advice to the commissioners. And you mentioned Pittsburgh and Philadelphia.
Right.
They are, if I recall correctly, either both home rule, which is completely different governmental structure that the people vote on, like Carlisle is a home rule municipality. And I think one is a first-class city, one's a second-class city, completely different legislative legal structure established by the state. I only mention that because if you have examples of that type of civilian review board in municipalities outside of those two, cities in the state of Pennsylvania, I'd be glad to take a look at that.
Okay. I'm not sure I can come up with it, but we'll find.
Right, and-
We'll find as close as possible to what Cumberland County looks like.
Right, but just so you're aware, I mean, I've dealt with this type of issue, and as was suggested to you maybe earlier, I was not at that meeting, the difficulty is, of course, it's state law. This board is governed by the third class county code, excuse me. And they have their authority only based on what the legislature gives them. One of the issues I see, now, you may be able to convince them it's a great idea, and it may be a great idea. The point is, they can't tell the sheriff what to do under the county code. So it'll have to be the sheriff's decision as to whether, if legally he can not only initiate a civilian review board, but even do it, because under law that exists now in Pennsylvania, the sheriff hires, fires, disciplines his own people.
Well, in most cases, the civilian review board are giving advice. They're not making anybody do anything.
I see what you're saying, yeah.
So,
Like I said, I'll be glad to look at that.
all right.
Whatever you provide with the commissioners would be great, and I'll be glad to look at it and give it a good review.
Great, thank you very much.
Okay.
Good afternoon. Mike Elsher, East Pennsboro Township. I'd like to address the question of whether the collective bargaining agreement with the union representing the deputy sheriffs prevents the things we are seeking from the county, prevents the items we are seeking from the county. Section 1620 of the county code says that the county road officers, which in this case is the sheriff, has the power to hire, fire, and supervise their employees. Section 1620 also empowers the county commissioners to represent the sheriff in negotiations for a collective bargaining agreement. A collective bargaining agreement can sign away the hiring, firing, and supervising rights of the sheriff vis-a-vis his or her employees, but the sheriff has to agree to those the surrender of whatever statutory or common law rights the sheriff has. So let's look at the collective bargaining agreement. The collective bargaining agreement actually supports what we're asking for. Article 2 says that the authority and responsibility of the management and business.
I'm sorry, you're just looking at the sheriff's one, right, not the prison? It's
Right.
just the sheriff, okay.
Correct for now,
Okay,
at least,
okay.
as I understand. Okay, so in other words, Article 2, Section 1 says the county and sheriff's office shall, the authority to manage the sheriff's office rests with the county and the sheriff. But more specifically, Section 2 of Article 2 basically delineates all the rights that the sheriff and the county retain in the collective bargaining agreement. The right to supervise their employees, hire, fire, the right to decide job qualifications, the right to lay off employees, et cetera, except as the agreement modifies those specific powers. And when you look at the rest of the agreement, it doesn't modify those specific powers. So what are we asking for? Officers who have been separated from the police force of another jurisdiction for use of excessive force or other serious misconduct will not be hired. Well, that's a job qualification. It's specifically given to the sheriff in Article 2. The other item we're asking for is that non-disclosure agreements, NDAs, not be entered into by the county when a deputy sheriff is fired for excessive use of force or other misconduct. Again, this isn't even addressed in the CBA. The CBA specifically said the sheriff can hire, fire, or supervise. Now, the union may argue that the grievance and arbitration provision in the CBA applies, but it doesn't. There's nothing in that provision, Article 8, or anywhere else in the CBA that says a deputy sheriff who is fired can opt to resign in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement. There's nothing in the grievance procedure or anywhere else according to the sheriff in terms of his internal policies that says to an employee, deputy sheriff, if we're gonna fire you, you have the right to have us sign an NDA in exchange for voluntarily resigning. So there's nothing in the CBA that prevents the sheriff from doing what we want him to do, or this county, from the county board from doing what we want him to do. In fact, the sheriff has specifically agreed to what we want him to do. So the only impediment here is, if any, is this. Thank you. Do you have any questions?
Solicitor, want to respond?
Yeah, I'm not, let me qualify what I'm going to say by saying this. I do some labor law. County has labor counsel. I see what you're saying. I need to dig into the agreement. But my initial reaction to that is that type of matter, and that is preventing an NDA agreement. I can't imagine should be bargained in that agreement. It's not in there. We can't, again, the county may have some hand in negotiating collective bargaining agreements under the law, which you've just read. But that type of item would require an agreement with the officers that are part of collective bargaining unit.
So you're
To
saying,
put that in the agreement.
you're saying the deputy sheriffs have the right to demand of the county an NDA under this collective bargaining agreement?
I'm not saying that at all.
Well, what, I don't know.
I'm just saying to put a term in there like that would require,
No, we don't want a term in there like that. We don't want a term in there like that.
you want something in there that says you will not get an NDA.
But that doesn't have to be in the collective bargaining agreement. That could just be a statement or a policy that the sheriff's office has.
It's not binding on anyone. If it's not in the collective, and again, I don't want to get into an argument on this, that's not my purpose.
No, I know.
My purpose is just to understand.
Me too.
And, you know, I've heard what you said. Like I said, I need to look at that agreement closely. I see it every so many years when it comes up because Labor Council negotiates that on behalf of the county. And I'll be glad to consider what you're saying.
Great.
So if you want to provide your comments to the commissioners, to provide to me, that's perfectly fine.
Okay.
Just so I understand though, I mean, your comment was the sheriff's willing to give away his powers based on, which I have a hard time believing, frankly. I'd love to hear him say it. But number two, your assertion was there's nothing standing in the way of this board agreeing to it or the sheriff agreeing to it. And what the solicitor's saying, as I understand it, is yes, there is. It has to be bargained.
Right.
Am I stating that
That's
correctly?
exactly what I'm
Okay.
saying.
Right, so,
You have a grievance procedure, so that if the sheriff wants to fire a deputy sheriff, and the deputy sheriff doesn't agree with it, he or she goes through the grievance procedure, right?
Right.
There's nothing in that grievance procedure that says the deputy sheriff has the right to demand an NDA from the county in exchange for voluntarily resigning. So it doesn't fall within the CBA. That's what I'm saying. And we want the sheriff to enunciate and the county to enunciate a policy that says, and the sheriff assures us personally that he never enters into
you're
it.
forgetting if I don't take your word for it.
But, no, I understand, well, you wouldn't take my word for it. But the point is, because I'm only a taxpayer and a resident of the county. But at any rate, my point is that it's not covered, that this isn't covered by the CBA. And therefore, if the sheriff wants to announce publicly and the county wants to announce publicly that we're not going to enter into an NDA, it's not prevented by this CBA. That's all.
But the union has to agree to it.
No,
Yeah.
no.
It's
I need to look at it.
Okay, fine, that's fine. I appreciate this.
I have a question for you. So I'm getting the impression from listening that you've been back to see the sheriff since the day that we all sat down with him.
I haven't seen him. They're having conversations that I have not been a part of, so maybe Dom can
Dawn's
answer
doing
that
it,
question.
okay. all
But
right.
if, I mean, I'm done.
No, that's, I just wondered.
And so my question is that I'm not going to say what Mike just said. We do have some case law, if you want to see permanent precedent that's been set by Commonwealth Court in Pennsylvania. I think that it would be useful at this point. We've reviewed, the CBA, which there's no conflict that we can identify. There isn't anything in the CBA that prohibits any of our events, not even slightly fact, the sheriff has communicated with us on numerous occasions when we met here on June 12th, and also in recent discussions as recent as yesterday, that he already, in practice, supports two of our demands, and that's not employing into the NDAs and not rehiring officers who have been formally discharged for cause. So this is already in practice, and if we're able to judge based on his actions up to this point, the union hasn't challenged those actions, so we have no reason to believe or fear that the union would then all of a sudden take action against these types of standards if they were just making them written code. They're already in practice apparently. The sheriff has stated that he is already in practice committed to at least two of these demands personal, but it's not policy. And there will be a sheriff after Sheriff Anderson, and we want to make sure that our community standard, I'm also a taxpayer here, I'm also a resident here in Cumberland County, that our standard is that this is what we're going to do going forward. Because Sheriff Anderson does this because he has common sense, and common sense is not common. You know, so there will be someone that comes after him, and we want to make sure that we protect our community. And there's nothing that prohibits it. There is a code 1620, but Sheriff Anderson has indicated that he has no will, no intent to challenge any action by the Board of Commissioners on these matters. So there will be no challenge present. There is no conflict present.
Any policy by the sheriff, I mean, I'm sure you're aware of this, can be changed by the sheriff, and certainly can be changed by the subsequent elected sheriff.
That is absolutely true, and I appreciate you, Mr. Brennan, for being here, by the way. And so what I want to do is at least work on what we can do while we're here. You're all in a position of leadership. These are community leaders that we're with today. You've been in the community for quite a while, Mr. Brennan. So let's make sure that we protect our communities and focus on what we have in front of us while we're here. We can't concern ourselves with what might happen tomorrow. We can try our best to protect the community for tomorrow, but eventually there will be someone that succeeds all of us. So I appreciate that opinion, but one thing that I would like to submit to the Board of Commissioners, because this is our third week in a row now, I guess, discussing these issues in some form or another. And I would like us to come to the table together to start to figure out what we can do. Maybe it's not exactly the form that our demands state, which I respect and understand. You have to do what's best. Legal counsel has to offer you the right that he can to protect the county and the county heirs. I understand that. But let's come to the drawing table. You know, Sheriff Anderson is with us on this. You know, I would like us all, you know, the sheriff's solicitor, the sheriff himself, who's indicated he's totally available for this meeting that I'm about to suggest. If we all, the Board of Commissioners, Sheriff Anderson, his solicitor, Solicitor Brenneman, could all come together to formulate an idea of how this could work or how we can move in the direction and the pursuance of these demands to protect our communities, I think that would be a great idea to move us forward so that we don't continue to get back and forth on these. Would everyone here be willing to commit to such a meeting?
I'll be frank, the issue that I continue to have is you're talking about what results from a disciplinary matter from a sheriff deputy. Whether or not it's under the collective bargaining agreement or not, that, and I understand, I think I understand what you're saying, I still need to look at it. But those are things that maybe someday the commissioners can influence, but right now, I just don't see them. And I'd love to know what Sheriff Anderson and his solicitor thinks about that as well. Because, I mean, I see this peripherally a lot of times. I mean, sometimes I don't. But what happens in the sheriff's office and what is known by his solicitor is really where the rubber meets the road. You know, if this is something Sheriff Anderson is behind and he wants to endorse, there's not a thing the commissioners can do about it. There's not a thing. So that, again, I want to keep repeating myself, but that I think is the focus of your efforts, at least initially. Because it's going to be extremely difficult without a legal basis for the commissioners to tell the sheriff what he can do.
I think that's part of the problem where we're perceiving what would be essentially a moot conflict, because there actually is not a conflict. The sheriff is yielding, we spoke to him previously, he's yielding to the Board of Commissioners to take action.
And I'm not aware of that, and I'm not saying you're wrong, but it's just something I've not heard before.
And I'm gonna tell you, and I'm sorry to say this, I wasn't aware of that coming into this meeting, and I wish I would have been.
Yes.
I will tell you, I'm willing to sit down and have that meeting. I think that would be good.
Absolutely.
For the sheriff's office and his solicitor, and for the commissioners and our solicitor to sit down as a group and really hash this out.
Okay, and I want to apologize for that. Because of the way our organization is structured, there's certain things that are internal documents, and that line between what is internal and what can be distributed sometimes gets blurred. But I want to make sure that coming into that meeting, I provide every resource that we possibly can, so that everyone's aware of what we're bringing into the meeting. So if we are something like that, I will provide you with every resource that we are coming into
That would
that
be good.
meeting.
That would be very helpful.
And
To have it like 2 days in advance, you know,
Yeah, absolutely.
to read it.
Absolutely, and I apologize for not providing that.
I just think it's worth noting that the 1620 rights of all the independently elected officials, that is something that they guard and defend regularly and aggressively. So when someone says secondhand, this or that officer is willing to give away their 1620 rights, I have a naturally skeptical reaction to that, because I've been here long enough to see umpteen conflicts arise over independence of these elected officials to do what they perceive to be within their rights and what is legally spelled out within their rights. And sometimes that dovetails with what the commissioners who are charged with the larger responsibility of managing the county government, machinery of county government, want to do versus what an independently elected official wants to do.
Yeah.
They are very stringent, very protective of that, as they are in other counties, but particularly this county. So I think there would have to be a lot of discussion in regards to what exactly that means if someone's agreeing to waive 1620 rights. How broadly does that apply? So there's going to be natural skepticism on the part of the board and anyone who understands the history of 1620 rights.
Yeah, and I do understand, and I want to say, Commissioner Appleberger, you're absolutely right, that's just the nature of humans. People don't generally want to seize power that they've already garnered. The thing is that that framing is, I think, an incorrect way to think of this. The sheriff is already enacting this in practice. So he's not forfeiting his 1620 rights. He's redirecting action that he's already decided that he's willing to take or not to take.
Forfeit was not my word, that's the word that was used by others.
Gotcha. I apologize. But you see what I'm saying? It's just the sheriff is already delegating this power or acting in these ways.
Okay. Well, if we do the meeting, we take that approach, we can work out the fine particulars, and we'll find out who's agreeing to what, who's not agreeing to what.
Okay, yeah.
That's
Yes,
the
sir.
way forward.
I don't want to speak for the sheriff, but I'm just relaying what he communicated with me.
I think it's important that the sheriff has his legal counsel available. We don't know if he has talked to him or her. It's like we sometimes are asked legally, what do you think? And it's like, that's where we got a solicitor.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping the sheriff will access his solicitor. And I'm sure he will.
Yeah.
But just wanted to make that statement.
Yes, and so I appreciate that, Commissioner Beaver, as well. What I can do, I'm not sure how you all want to do this. We all have the ability to communicate with Sheriff Anderson. At some point after this meeting, we can figure out the best way to set that up between the Sheriff Anderson, his solicitor, Mr. Brennan, and you all, and figure out what that works best. Would that be agreeable for everyone?
Yes?
All right, much appreciated. And I appreciate you all for also giving us time to speak to you. I can thank you, Mr. Brennan, for being here. And I'll pass it down to Kathleen. Good.
Kathleen Tate on Hampton Township. I'm here today to ask for some of you to recommit and some of you to commit to something that is basically morally right to do, the right thing to do. And that's to recognize and to pass a resolution that affirms that Black Lives Matter sure people are counted that need to be. So I'm asking each and every one of you today.
So I'll go first, Kathleen. Yes, I will commit to a resolution from the county commissioners saying that Black Lives Matter. I've already let my fellow commissioners know that I committed to that resolution via petition, and I will most certainly commit to signing one.
Thank you. Commissioner Michael?
I'll reiterate what I've said before, which is the moniker Black Lives Matter has come to represent the movement, and that was even referred to in several of the emails that were sent to me. And my position does not change, which is I am happy to pass a resolution that reiterates the American ideal that all men are created equal, as spelled out originally in the Declaration of Independence. And there's amendments to the Bill of Rights as well. But I'm not taking on the baggage of the movement, at least not until I see several things take place. Two of which I can speak to right now. I'd like to see a renunciation of the street terrorism that has been occurring in the names of Black Lives Matter. And the disrespect and disregard for basic American institutions, including historical markers, and I'm not talking about Confederate flags, I'm talking about United States presidents and individuals who are foundational to the formation of the republic. I cannot support a group that continues to denounce economic freedom and free markets and refers to that as the source of inequality. It's not the source of inequality, it's providing an opportunity for equality to be realized by many, not by all. We have a great way to go in terms of realizing the ideals of the country that are spelled out in those documents and American ideas. Tearing those things down is not the way we achieve that. And that's what I'm seeing and hearing on a regular basis from the movement. So until such time as the movement and the organizers of the movement, the activists, are willing to address some of these issues, I'm not going to sign on to a resolution that states it in the manner that you stated. However, I am more than happy to assert a commitment and acknowledgement to the ideal that all men and women belong to a universal brotherhood and sisterhood. And we should respect that, and we should stand against all forms of bigotry, racial, political, all forms.
Okay, well, first of all, we're from Capital Region, stands up, part of a coalition through a parent organization called Pennsylvania Stands Up. We are not with the Black Lives Matter movement. We are supporting Black Lives Matter as their lives, as Black human beings. So it's everything that you demanded right there from us is not something that's within our purview in our groups, because we are asking for you to stand up for the residents, the Black and brown residents of Cumberland County. So, for your constituency, it's not about just about, to say, you're making it about a movement and a slogan. We're here repeatedly telling you that, John said last week, Black Lives Matter just as much as any other life. That's what this is about. This isn't about a slogan. This is about human beings.
I think I made it very clear that I have no problem with that slogan in its entirety, even though it's still a slogan. But I believe we've covered it well in defending our Constitution, which provides for exactly that, regardless of color, the colorblind society. Dr. Martin Luther King spoke of. So if we could find verbiage that everybody thinks is acceptable and that throws off some of the connotations that have been adopted through the Black Lives Matter slogan by the movement, as it has been characterized, we could compromise on verbiage. I don't know that we need verbiage. It's right in the Declaration of Independence. It's in.
So, Commissioner Eichelberger, may I please ask a question? I think that what this group is really asking is that we abandon this preconceived notion about what Black Lives Matter means in the media, right? How they're portraying it in the media. how they're portraying people that are a part of the Black Lives Matter movement as being rioters, right? As being people that are just out there causing problems. So, I mean, Kathleen, if I'm missing the boat, you need to let me, please stop me. But what I'm hearing all of you say is that it's so important to you that the county comes forth and says, Black and brown lives are important. They're just as important as the white lives. They're just as important as anyone else who lives in Cumberland County, and you're all lying. So, could you, with my help, we can work on a resolution, and I can take it to my commissioners and say, what do you think? Can we tweak it? Can we not tweak it? Where do you think we can go with this? Because what you're saying is damn important. It is. It is. And I will tell you that I have worked with our Somali community. I have worked with our Muslim community. Okay? I know what they deal with. I hear what the Muslim community deals with. I hear what the Somali community deals with. I watched the video of the child being beaten in the Mechanicsburg Middle School, right, for being Muslim, for wearing a hijab. So I'm not hearing you say that this is down to this one little piece, right? We're not narrowly focused on something. We're talking about something that's bigger and better than all of us. So would you be in agreement that we could work on that? And then I would leave it, my commissioners, if that's up to them, okay? But I would like to work on that with you, and we can come, and I don't hear Commissioner Eichelberger saying no. I hear him saying, let's get the verbiage right.
And Gene, I would pretty much say the same thing. My position hasn't changed from last week. I will not sign a resolution based on what this movement is showing us now. As I stated last week, I believe, and always have believed, in equality for all, and all lives matter. That's not a difficult thing, I think, to put in verbiage. I would certainly
Right,
consider. I
But
would
we
consider.
specifically, there's
I
one
would
thing, let's be
consider
clear
that.
here, we specifically are reaffirming the value of the Black and brown human beings in our community, because they are the ones that are disproportionately targeted. So this isn't going, this resolution will have to.
What do you mean by target? What does that mean? No, this is important. No, the choice of words is very important.
We haven't written the resolution, yet. Why are you?
Okay, but
You're making assertions regarding target. What is
Black and
target?
brown people are targeted. Okay, this
By?
for police violence.
Okay, that's what I was asking.
Okay.
That's precisely
So
what I was
they
asking.
are targeted through, right now, this instance, with what has reawakened a movement to fight for fairness and justice for Black and brown people in America, has started from the George Floyd murder, okay? And that murder will not even be listed on a list of gun violence against Black people, because he was not killed with a gun. That man won't even count on their list, okay? That's wrong. He was murdered at the hands of 4 police officers, not just one, because the other 3 sat there and did nothing, okay? And that's wrong. And so we do owe it to people. When there are people that are unfairly targeted in our community and are vulnerable, we need to lift them up and make sure they know that they are valued and protected in our society. And that's, as leaders of the community, that is your job to also do. Okay, you are elected officials as leaders, the largest governing body in Cumberland County. And that is part of your job, to set the tone of what will be tolerated and not tolerated in our county. So we don't have another Muslim middle schooler being beaten up for wearing a hijab to school for their religious faith, which we have freedom of religion. So that's what's important, that you as the elected body, for us to show leadership and to do the right thing and do this.
I think this may surprise you, but I don't disagree with anything you said. I'm simply trying to get clarity here, and you identified for me that it's in regards to police violence. And that's valuable to know, because I think if we're gonna have this discussion, and whether a resolution evolves from that or not, part of the dialogue has to be that we're separating very specifically, saying bad police, not all police. Okay, so targeting by whom was asked not as a dismissive, it was meant for clarity. So if that's what we're gonna be addressing, I'm all in, okay? No, we can't tolerate the bad cops. Nobody's disputing that, but I will tell you, there's a lot of good policemen out there who are feeling targeted as well.
But this resolution
And-
is, excuse me, but this resolution, and I don't want to stray from what the important matter here is at hand. This isn't about talking about bad cops. This is about talking about the people that are suffering, okay? We have, the part of the bad cops that we're working on is this collective bargaining agreements, all of the community board. Those are the things that will help take care of bad cops. Right now, this is the part to reaffirm the value and importance of black and brown people within our community. So this is what this is important about.
Kathy,
So Commissioner, go ahead, Norm, but, I'm sorry, I really feel like this is very important for me to say. Because Commissioners, I have been, involved with particularly our Muslim community, who has called me and said, I went to Representative Rothman, we went to Senator Regan, because people are spray painting our homes, people are tormenting our children on the street, people are doing these things, and their response was, well, if this is going on, you just come to us and tell us, which is not a good answer.
Agree.
Okay, so when Kathleen and the group brings this and says, by adopting this resolution that says that for the greater good, right, that black and brown people matter, it's a piece of backing them up in a way that's far more important than Rothman going, well, just let me know, I'll deal with it, right? Because that's such a bad, Kathleen is right when she says we are elected officials and we lead the pack.
Mhm.
And I don't want to be the kind of leader that goes, well, just call me, I'll deal with it, you know? I mean, by doing this and putting it in writing and getting it out there in the public, we're saying, you can't do that here. We're not gonna, this is not a community that tolerates spray painting someone's home. This is not a community that tolerates picking on children. That's what I think Kathleen is trying to.
And I don't necessarily disagree with any of that, but I think it's important to get the verbiage right, because a lot of this is being portrayed as anti-police, and I think this board wants to be supportive of good police. So how you word it, and this is to be worked out over time. So,
Commissioner Foxy has suggested a way to do that, and it can be done. I'm satisfied.
I will say this, I think it would be our expectation to accept your goodwill would be multiplied many times over if you would stop engaging in the type of shameful lying in social media that you've engaged in.
Yeah, so, I agree, Kathleen, thank you. Just in general, I think that we've come to some good agreements here in terms of how we can move forward. And it's much appreciated on behalf of the commissioners. Also, thank you all for being here. And I think that part of our work going forward can be building those relationships between both parties so that there's trust there and that there is no need for any disagreements or lack of good faith as you described it. So we hope to continue to build that relationship between the Board of Commissioners and our organization. And we'll do our best to continue that relational building as we go forward. So I hope that's sufficient.
We seem to have a good way forward. I want to note, and I hope you appreciate that we've been more than generous with the 3-minute prohibition that was generally in place. So, but I felt it was well worth it, and we allowed the conversation to move along. And
Thank you.
So, if there's no other business,
Yeah, if you would adjourn the meeting, because I really want to talk with the group about the logistics of us moving forward.
Just one thing, Mr. Chairman, I just want to mention to you folks, I mentioned to my colleagues yesterday that I was working on a letter to the editor about my thoughts and ideas about addressing racism, not as a county commissioner, just as a fellow human being. So instead of releasing that to the newspaper, I think I'm going to give it to Gene. And we can maybe consider using pieces of that. I have like 4 main topics of how this could be addressed. It's not just one. But I just wanted to mention that. That's all. Thank
I
you.
also want to offer.
Thank you.
I also want to offer. I've been able to communicate very effectively with Commissioner Fashi and Sheriff Anderson. Commissioner Eichelberg and DeFilippo, if you would like to, after this also understand, I want to understand how you feel as well, so please feel free to, do that after you.
Very good. Thank you.